The reason I used Alec as a kind of an example, Alec would be, you were born when, Alec?
1994.
Let's say you'd be a millennial. 1981 to 1996 is a millennial. I'm always trying to understand why the world is. My wife's always said it's just like you to go down the road of trying to figure out, why this is happening, or why. She said it's just not happening, or it is happening. That's good enough for me. That I read the headline. I'm cool with the headline. I'll let the geeks, nerds, and know-it-alls. And I guess I'm not a geek nor a nerd, so she's suggesting that potentially she's married to a know-it-all. She said, I'll let you folks figure out, exactly why everything is and the underlying current and the prevailing. She said, I hear you all the time talking about prevailing force. I'm not interested in the prevailing force. I just want to know where that prevailing force leads us. And I found this very interesting. For the first time in American history, the majority of our workforce are millennials. About 51% of the workforce in America today are millennials. I had a chart here I'm trying to get my hands on, but I can't do it right now. I've had it stuck in a stack of stuff. Here we go. In 1994, I think you'll find this interesting, Rib. In 1994, 21% of America's workforce were the silent / greatest generation. 94. And a long, long time ago. What's that, 25, 26 years ago? Somewhere thereabout.
24.
So 21% of the entire workforce in America were of the silent greatest generation. 50% were baby boomers. 29% were Generation Xers. And there were no millennials or post-millennials. They weren't born yet.
Yeah,
so, of course,
they were just being born.
They were born, but that's right. They were being born. They were babies. They were kindergarten students, already with flowers in their hair and, men with ears pierced. In 2017, 2% of the American workforce is silent greatest generation. 25% are baby boomers. So the baby boomers went from 50% to 25% in those past 25 or so years. Generation Xers are 33%. Millennials are 35%. Post-millennials are only 5%. So a third of the workforce is millennials. Another third of the workforce is Generation Xers. So we have about 70%. 70% of the workforce in America today are Generation Xers or baby boomers. Generation Xers were born between 1965 and 1980. The baby boomers were born between 1981 and 1996. So what are the characteristics? What was important to the generation, the greatest generation, the silent generation? I would be a baby boomer. What was important to the baby boomers? How do those personal dispositions and beliefs affect the economy? Here's where I want to head. Because I worry about the productivity of the American economy, the stagnation within the American economy. We always talk about, stagnant wages and income and, income inequality. All these things lead to a certain place. And I thought it very curious when you look at the millennials, and they make up, once again, a third of the workforce, and they're by far the fastest growing segment within the American workforce. Alec would be a prime example. That's why I asked him, we know a little bit about Alec's story. I would imagine that story is replicated all throughout the country. You get out of college, you're looking for a job, you end up in a job as a at a radio station or wherever. But we live in a very different era and a different time. And I went back through Pew Research, and Monmouth has done a good bit of information gathering. What's different about the workforce today than when you and I, Rev, were in our very young working lives? Here's something that I think is different. And I think there's a social commentary here somewhere. I'm not sure I know what it is, but it's incredibly different today. And I don't think it dawned on me how different it is until I began to delve in some of these issues. Here's something I think that matters a lot. because we talk about the ever-changing face of America. How far has America gone to the left? We see the polling on, in 1965, only 1% of Americans thought socialism was a good idea to consider. Today, and 26 to 27%. And it's overwhelmingly the millennials. You believe it or not, but in some polls, a majority of millennials believe socialism is a form of government we should seriously consider. It's not 70 or 80%, but in some polls, 52, 53, 54%. So we've gone from the baby boomers and the silent / greatest generation saying, that's crazy. Nobody will believe socialism is a good answer, to all of a sudden, not an embracing of socialism, but an interest, a curiosity in socialism. In 1965, a majority of women were not participating in the workforce, 58%. Only about 38% were employed. Today, 71% of millennial women are employed. 26% are not in the workforce. So think of that. We've more than flipped those numbers upside down. In 65, about 60% were not in the workforce. Today, 71% are in the workforce. So far more women are working today. Well, I'm not saying a woman's job to stay home and take care of the kids and keep. I'm not saying that. I'm not suggesting that. That there was a day in America that was an honorable profession, because that's what it is. A homemaker, a housewife is indeed a profession. But for whatever reason, we have dramatically changed that. Never before in the planet's history, not America's history, in the planet's history, have both both mother and father being employees at the percentage they are now. The majority of American families, both parents work. I'm not talking about why you work, how much money you make, your socioeconomic standard. I'm just talking about that being a cultural / societal reality. We don't have a lot of women staying home raising the kids. We just don't. We have an abundance of daycares, world-class daycares, great facilities that take care of the kid, but that's something very different about society today than in 1965. The mid-'80s, the early '80s is really when this accelerated in an enormous way. I think this is interesting, incredibly interesting. Millennials today are more than 3 times as likely to have never married as silents or baby boomers when they were that age. About 6 in 10 millennials have never been married. In 1965, the typical American woman married at age 21, the typical American man age 23. By 2017, these figures climbed to 27 for women and 29.5 for men. By 2017, those figures had climbed to 27 for, just 17% had never been married. Think of that. Think of the societal, that's an incredible shift. You've got baby boomers and silent / greatest generations. By and large, the woman stayed at home. The man was the breadwinner to the tune of about 60%. And they were married. All of a sudden, many, many, many fewer people are married, and there are far more women, in the workforce. And I'm just arguing, I'm not saying that's good nor bad. I'm not saying it's the way it should be or the way it shouldn't be. I'm just arguing that these are incredible, incredible differences. And I'm talking about this because I have a lot of conversations. You and I were having a conversation before the show. Mm-hmm. What are things you understand about your kids, and what are things you don't understand about your kids? And it dawned on me. Yesterday and the day before and a few days, we talk with parents all the time. I got lunch today with a buddy of mine who's confused. You know what I mean? He texted me last night, hey, man, you got a minute for lunch? Yeah, why? I'll see if you can help me with something. And I said, what is it? I don't know if I'm the expert on these. Well, I know you're not an expert, but I'm it's just, I mean, we got kids and we don't understand these millennials. And in fairness, they don't really understand. They don't understand us. Although millennials came of age at a time when the United States engaged in military conflicts in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and that'd be after the September 11 terrorist attacks, they are far less likely to have served in the military. Among men born between the ages of 21 and 36, only 4% are veterans. In the silent greatest generation, 47% of men had served. So nearly half of the men in America had served sometime in some division of our armed forces. 47% then, 4% now. This is very interesting to me. And this is, bear with me. You know how we do this. We'll put a bow on it at some point in time. 2/3 of Americans lived in metropolitan areas in 1975. 66% lived in a major metropolitan area. 89% of all millennials in America live in an area designated a major metropolitan area. I mean, think of the vast differences in lifestyles and cultures and just things you accept or not. We're going to go into church attendance. There's so many things that are so incredibly different today than there were, and we have this miscommunication. We have this misunderstanding. And I'm not saying somebody has it right and somebody has it wrong, but I do believe, as we say in Pamplico, there's a lot of chicken on that bone to chew on when we try to understand the differences.
Yeah, why?
Why?
Yeah.
Why would be the perfect question to ask if America is as different as I think it is from when I was, 25 or 6 or 7 years old. Why? What happened? I mean, did we just gradually, become smarter, more productive? No. I mean, there are some fundamental differences here between a generation or two of people and and I'm not saying it's bad. Please don't misunderstand. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing for the country. I think we better be careful because I think there are some things here that are tried and true that we don't seem to be relating to in the proportion and in the percentages that I would argue serve the country in a positive way. Let's take a break. We'll be back after the break. I want to continue this conversation. Love to hear what anybody else out there had to say is in relation. And what I'm trying to get at is, why don't we understand millennials and why don't they understand us? And how long can we continue to go down the road of trying not to understand one another? 843-661-0937. Thanks to our good friends and Thursday morning sponsor, Schofields.